The question comes in Arabic. What is the ruling in Islam concerning the marriage of a Muslim woman from a non-Muslim? If this happened, is that halal or not? Would you please give some particulars or details? The answer to that question comes right from the Quran itself. I mean, it's not a ruling that some jurists have arrived at. In Surah Al-Ma'idah it says, اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامكم حل لهم والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب. It says today, good things has been permitted unto you. The food of the people of the book is permitted unto you. Your food is permitted unto them. Also permitted unto you are the chaste women. And those who know Arabic, it uses the term wal-muhsanat, which applies only to females. And it says muhsanat, from the people of the book before you. Now, the very ayah itself specifies not only that it is not available or allowed both ways, that a Muslim woman cannot get married to a non-Muslim, but the reverse is not true with respect to the male Muslim. But it also gives an important condition which many male Muslims also tend to not pay much attention to. That it says that chaste women of the people of the book. And that's a very important qualification, and I wonder whether some of the Muslim males who rush to marry non-Muslims have really paid much attention or heeded this particular requirement in view of the kind of common practice in the society from which they get married. But before getting any further into other qualifications, I know, or I have a feeling that the question seems to have a hidden question or hidden agenda also into it, which is a very common question, so allow me also to touch on it. Some people will say, why? Why didn't the Quran say allowing both? Why is that discrimination? A male can do as he wishes, he can marry to a Muslim or non-Muslim, but a female, no, she has to marry only to a Muslim. What's the reason? Number one answer, and we should never be apologetic about that, is that who said that? Who said that rule? If that rule was set by a male or female, we might say, all right, there might have been some male bias or female bias. But the rule was set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we have to be humble with Him. And we have to realize that His knowledge and wisdom far transcends our own human wisdom and rational reasoning. Definitely is above that. If we know Allah properly, or we know about Allah properly, then we also realize that Allah does not punish the Muslim Ummah by making them abstain from something good by way of punishment. As the mission of the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned in the Quran, يُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِصْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. The Prophet came to make lawful unto us things that are pure and good, make unlawful to us things that are bad and evil, and remove any shackles that used to be in the past. The Quran talks about the Israelites, for example, being punished because of their deeds. حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُمْ. Even good things were forbidden to them by way of punishment. That ended with the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. So when Allah says this should not be done, it is not for way of punishment or tormenting the women rather than men. There must be some wisdom behind it, whether we fully grasp it or not. And we should always start with this non-apologetic, direct approach to the Quran. But it does not prohibit us, as indicated earlier, from trying to seek some understanding to the best of our human ability. And by the way, this methodology, I am humbly suggesting, does not only apply to this question of marriage, it applies to many other questions. People say, why don't you eat pork? You start again with this basic answer, and then from there you can go on other reasons. Some of the other reasons. We all know that in many cultures, it's very common that the child take the name of the father. And many times, or often, actually adopt the religion of the father. That's one problem. Another problem is that in many societies, including even today's society, no matter how you put it, still, despite of the influence of the mother, usually the male member of the family or the husband seems to have more control in his family and more power, if not by sheer physical power. Somehow there is a tendency that he would occupy that role. Not in all cases, but there is a tendency for him to play that role. If he plays that role and he's not a Muslim and married to a Muslimah, Number one, he does not believe in her prophet. He does not believe in her holy book, in the Quran. He does not believe in the kind of ibadat that she's doing. And since he has usually the upper hand in the family, how could a Muslim woman be assured and ascertain the practice of Islam without instruction? Second, we all know that some of the rules in ibadat, like fasting, that during fasting, for example, a wife cannot have intimate relationship with her husband. Suppose he does not understand why is that fasting, does not even respect it, does not care about it, and he wants his wife during Ramadan in the day. What would be the situation? And what kind of life would be there? Fourthly, if you look at it the other way around, a Muslim male is married to a Christian or a practicing Christian or Jew. Number one, he believes in her prophet. He believes in the original form of her revelation. His religion teaches him that he should not compel her in religion, should allow her to practice her own faith. You don't have the same analogy in the case of the reverse. But even then, what is forgotten in answering this question sometimes is that many people take that as a privilege for the male and something that females are deprived from. And what is forgotten is that even when Islam allowed the males to get married to non-Muslims, not any non-Muslim, of course, to kitab, people of the book, it allowed that with the intention or the understanding that the future of the husband and his children will not be in danger. And as many jurists indicated, it was made with the understanding that the Muslim wife, the non-Muslim wife, is living in a predominantly Islamic culture, where the child, as indicated earlier, learned not only from school, but learned from family, from all kind of media around him, which is basically, or hopefully, more Islamic oriented. And as such, it is a sign of goodwill towards followers of other religions, with the understanding that that wife is somewhat inclined to Islam, with the hope that when she sees a good example in her husband and in the Muslim community, perhaps she might be inclined and hopefully turn out to Islam, as it happened in many cases in the past, and sometimes it happened also at the present time. It also assumes that the father is acting as the father and the head of the household, and taking active role in the upbringing of his children according to Islam. But again, unfortunately, we find that many of those who do not care much as to who they wish to ask for marriage are ones who are directed actually by their wives. They have, like they say in Arabic, shurrabat khurb. They don't do much. They just follow what their wives are telling them. And we know of many tragedies where people have been married to non-Muslim women, and in fact, the children are raised as non-Muslims, and the father has no power, and the wife takes them to the church despite of the will of the husband. What kind of intermarriage is this? And when you look at the whole purpose of Sharia, of marriage as being sakina, as being the school for upbringing Muslim children, how could that happen when you have this divergence even in the most intimate thing in the life of the individual, his own religious beliefs? So these are reasonable qualification and expectation when a person goes beyond this. And let us remember also the very important statement made by Sayyidina Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, when he knew that one Muslim was planning to get married to a Kitabi woman, or actually in one case even he did marry, and he said that if you do that, I am afraid that you may get married to women who are not chaste, number one. And he said, if you do that, it would be fitna, it would be commotion and trial for Muslim women. And the reason for that is that the Muslim woman can only get married to a Muslim. And if many Muslims get married to non-Muslims, who's going to get married to those Muslim women? Aren't we pushing them actually into a situation which is impossible, especially when you talk about a community where Muslims are living as minority? I would not go as far as some minority opinion said that in this situation it becomes haram. But I would say it gets the closest thing to haram in the situation of Muslims in North America, to forsake the Muslim sisters and get married to outside of this. So I hope that at least makes some partial clarification of this very quickly. Should we go in the same order of receiving the question, more or less, or do you want to say All right. A related question here. How are Muslim girls supposed to get married here? I refer to our daughters who are brought up here, since there is no arranged marriage or dating. And who said that dating solves the problem and really results in happy life ever after? They date and they try each other in every sense of the word, and still we have 40% or more divorce rate. Who said that dating is the solution of the problem? But on the other hand, some Muslim youths have this difficulty because there is this duality again, or lack of understanding on the part of their parents. And some may give the impression to their children that the specific cultural practice in their own country is Islam and nothing but Islam, which means that the only time you see your wife is after you sign on the dotted line, which is nothing to do with Islam, as you all know. And we know that this exists in some cultures. I've been told that firsthand by a brother. The first time he saw his wife is after everything was finished and that they moved to the house of the husband. But when we look at it the proper Islamic simple way, you find that first of all, the purpose is not really dating in itself or courting. The purpose of seeing the husband to be or wife to be is just to discover whether a person would feel comfortable getting married to that person, whether the personality is compatible, whether there's some sharing, not some knowledge about the personality of the person with whom a person might get stuck for many years to come. If this is the case, you don't really need dating. You don't need a car and a park area or movies, drive-in movies and all this stuff. You need to talk. And there's no problem of talking in the presence of mahram, as Sharia says, avoiding total separation. Well, some say there may be some question that they don't want everybody to listen that. What is the real definition of khalwa? Well, there could be other ways that could be done. I'm not revealing secrets when I say in one family, for example, they receive the person who's engaged to their daughter, and they have like the living room and the door is open, the kitchen is there. They sit with him for a while, and the mother goes to the kitchen to fix a cup of tea, and it happened to be a cup of tea that takes a little long to prepare. But the door is open. There is no khalwa. Can you really define that as khalwa? My humble understanding is that the khalwa really in the technical sense is where you have total separation, where you could feel something bad really could develop, because when the door is open and somebody passing once in a while, not to spy or anything, but to make sure that there is no khalwa, it could be done. You could have a conference like this, and if there is serious intention really of marriage or proposal, and the person would like in a subtle way without really getting with final commitment wish to find out about the sister, maybe some kind of excuse could be created. You could go with if his sister is present or someone else, mother or whatever, and just create a situation when they start introducing or talking to someone else, at least getting some preliminary information. If that materializes, then perhaps further steps could be pursued. Many jurists indicated that it is not necessary to think of looking at just once. Some say, all right, if you looked at her once, that's it, period. But many jurists said that a person could look or talk as much as needed to, provided, of course, that she observes hijab, and he would be looking with the intention of trying to understand her or see how much rapport is likely to develop between them. So, in my humble understanding, there are solutions that would not be contradictory to Islamic teaching, would not be overly strict in a way that Islam even provided for some leeway, but without going also into the other extreme or getting into practices which are un-Islamic. And alhamdulillah, in practical experience, we know that in many conventions, I don't know what will happen in this one, but it may, like in many others, we know that some people got some preliminary feelers for marriage during conventions like this, during seminars, one-day seminar in a community. So these are various means, and alhamdulillah, we hear of many good and successful marriages that was initiated like that without all this westernized way of doing it. So inshallah, don't worry, Allah will reward you for your patience, and if we really obey Allah, inshallah, He will not get you stuck with something not very good. For what reason is the inferiority complex developed in the child? Partly because of his parent, partly because of the community claiming to be Muslim around him, and maybe I'm a bit critical in this. If the child is raised and he finds that his father's name, who was Muhammad, is changed to Michael, and Farid to Fred, and Sami to Sam, in order to be a good boy and to be accepted in society, he would grow with that complex. He would be ashamed of his name. He would be ashamed of his identity as a Muslim. When he sees one or both of his parents are apologetic of being Muslims, or when they are with the Romans, they do like Romans do, he would lose self-respect and self-confidence, and he would have more inferiority complex, more damaging than other persons. Because after all, he says, all right, those people are different, but now I don't belong here or there. I'm not really truly a Muslim, I don't practice Islam, I don't belong to those people because they still think I'm a foreigner from the old country. And that even becomes more damaging, and some people are pushed to imitate and try to please the non-Muslims around them. And that's what the Quran warned us against. وَلَنْ تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. The Jews and Christians will never be happy and content with you until you follow their ways. So this is what people find. This is the shortcut. Follow their ways. Of course, another aspect of it is the community itself. A person finds that the practice of Islam is a sort of apologetic practice. A sort of batching here and there. Something of Islam, something of non-Islam, and the community somehow lives in this duality. I'm not saying that every community must be perfect. Nobody can achieve perfection. But when, for example, on one hand, salah would be performed upstairs and a wedding would be downstairs in the basement with all tabarruj as if it's just a westernized party, or even dabka being danced or some other dance, and that is in the masjid. How could a child reconcile that to himself when somehow the same people who sit down in the masjid and say, Allahu Akbar, and all that khushu', and they discover their face and their head, and when they hear azan out of respect, everything's covered. And the same people are downstairs with tabarruj, and the same men are smoking and doing all kinds of things. How could a person reconcile that to himself? That results in inferiority complex. I didn't analyze all reasons, but I think these are major ones. If you work on them, fine. Perhaps that might be a good beginning. Would it save time, perhaps, since you read the questions, if there are two questions on the same topic, and you tell me about them instead of spending time reading them? Maybe I can give you that mic too. Prefer I give them? Oh, okay. Discipline and leadership is to be taught in Islamic institution, for example, education. Would you speak about beating children in school in order to institute Islamic discipline and leadership? I don't think that you're achieving much by resorting to this. And I'm not saying either that all Muslim jurists said that you should never resort to light punishment if the situation absolutely requires that. But as I recall, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you should not beat the Muslims so that you don't make them meek. And if a child is taught only by virtue of beating and the threat of punishment, that's not a very strong and upright type of personality, and the child will seek ways of doing what they want to do and still evade or avoid punishment. So I think the motivation should be more on positive side. If need be to have a sanction or negative, it need not necessarily be beating. The expression of displeasure itself could be part of it. The privation of certain things could work much more than just physical punishment. Just to give a chance, the question had the sheet has two questions, so maybe to give a chance, I take one and move to another. How do we distinguish halal meat of the people of the book from others? Kosher meat is obvious, but what about meat of the Christians? Very briefly, there are two jurisprudential opinions on the meat slaughtered by the people of the book. Some say it's not permissible, some say it is permissible. The difference goes back to hundreds of years. Whatever interpretation you feel comfortable with, do it, but don't condemn others for accepting others. But I leave you with a notice also that in an Islamic community, there is not much excuse for trying our best, even if you accept the interpretation that says it's permissible, to try to obtain or remove any doubt and obtain the biha meat. It should not be too difficult if there is enough cooperation to use the biha meat, and as such, it would have even more barakah because of the tasmiyah and because of the proper draining of the blood. But there are jurists who say that it's not haram to buy from the store, provided, of course, you don't have a certain knowledge that the animal was strangulated or something like that, or shot to death before, or died before bloodletting. Kindly explain the characteristics of a Muslim husband in relation to his wife, and when he should encourage her to put hijab. Anyway, I think I get the gist of the question. The first part of the question, maybe I'm making a free advertisement now. Inshallah will be covered in the evening session, may be covered. One of the possibility of topics that the program committee was discussing is this issue of family in Islam, the mutual rights and obligation of husband and wife and children, parents. But unless there is enough number of brothers attending that, maybe we can delay to some other time when they are present so that they can listen with their sisters too. But the second part, when he should encourage his wife to put hijab, he should always do that. It is a duty, and the Quran says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. You should guard yourself and your families against the hellfire. And of course, one of the reasons for going to hellfire, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is the negligence or disobedience to Allah concerning hijab. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is quite clear about women who do not cover and adorn themselves in front of others, that they will not enter into paradise, not even get a smell of it. So what could be even more clear than this? So if a husband truly loves his wife, I think he would really should encourage her. However, it doesn't mean that he has to hold a stick and try to just force her from the very beginning. I think it comes much more effectively when it comes from conviction. You should provide her with material, and through affection also try to explain to her that it's not just chauvinism on his part, that this is the command of Allah, that he's responsible for the family, that he cares about her. And inshallah, I hope there will be more success in this way. What is the best way to make my son not to lie? Find out why he lies. If it is a psychological problem, well, that could be treated. If a person lies because he feels that there is a sort of authoritarian approach on the part of parents and he is afraid of being or getting it, maybe that could be the solution of trying to assure the child. Maybe just a sort of negligence and lack of appreciation of the seriousness of lying, in which case a person can kindly again explain to him or her the importance of being truthful, reminding him of ayat and hadith about this. A person may be lying also sometimes because, as some psychiatrists say, a child in a certain age may not be able to fully distinguish between imagination and reality. Not really that he's lying because you said, did you go to school, and he lies, say, I went even though he was playing in the street. That's bad, of course, obviously bad. But when the child says, I saw such and such things, and I saw a flying saucer. It was in the backyard of our house. Yes, I did. And insist on that. Sounds like I say the person may not necessarily be deliberately vicious or evil. That sometimes the line between reality and imagination becomes a little bit hazy at one point or the other because of their imagination, the strength of their imagination. So in that case, you can let it go without making much of it. Since that sheet has also two other questions, maybe it's fair to move to another. And inshallah, for those who have multiple questions, we can get to when we give fair chance. And for those who have extremely lengthy questions like this, maybe I'll give to the sister to read and maybe give me the gist of it to save the time. Why is it always the male who has the power? Who said that? And what is really power? And you take it even from the area of, like they say, management and leadership and all this monkey business they teach to business people and all that. When you're talking about power, there are all kinds of power. There is physical power, muscles. Alright? And of course, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave 1/6 a stronger muscle on the average than female, well, it has nothing to do with superiority really. It might be connected more with the duty and responsibility of the husband to provide for the family. If they mean by power, influence or formal authority, then this is only one aspect of power. An authority like a general would have an authority over a major, but that does not have the same analogy again. The major is not the husband and the wife is not the sergeant. And inshallah, I hope during the discussion in the evening, if the topic inshallah would be the one that you seem to prefer on husband-wife relationship, we'll talk inshallah about the nature of obedience, the nature of qawama, and what are the limitations of it. This is nothing to do with the power, the way people think of it. And if you mean by power, as some psychologists even put it, or behaviorists, the ability to influence, then there are all kinds of powers. Example, your doctor has power over you, not because he can hold you and force you to open your mouth and swallow the tablets, or hold the stick, or say you're fired unless you take the medicine. But he has what you might call expert power, as some behaviorists call it. He has an expert power. So you listen to him and obey because you know that it's for your own good. And he can tell you smiling very softly, please take this, and you take it. You'll obey. He has power over you. There is the charismatic power. If a person is able to influence others because of certain charisma, whether for good or evil, you know, of course, Hitler was charismatic. I mean, all kind of charisma. And Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab were charismatic because they affected people also doing evil. And that could be a sort of power. It doesn't mean necessarily that power is positive or good. And there is also the power to influence by the personality of the individual, by knowledge, by the way people relate to him or her. And that's where you cannot have much distinction really between male and female. What could be a greater influence and power in the hand of the mother being the school in which the first child is graduated? What could be more powerful influence on the child as the mother does? So if you mean by power this, the objective power, the influence, you could also have a husband who is officially the boss of the household. But if you have a good wife also, a wise wife, through her own personality and her sweetness and so on, she can convey her message and her opinion very nicely to her husband without antagonizing him and still have power. But in a very nice way, not by saying to him, thou shalt do this or else. It is not necessarily that. So there's nothing like this. And in fact, if you talk about power in terms of superiority, the Quran is quite clear. Superiority is by taqwa. If you mean by power, again, participation and having some say, my understanding is that even though the husband would have the rule of the leader or overall head of the family, it doesn't mean that nobody else has any power, that he's got 100%, all others have zero. Americans always make fun of Islam because it allows men to marry 4 wives. What could be the answer to that? Until then, it is not very strange that not so many people are making fun of many Americans marrying 1 wife and having 10 other sweethearts. Now, of course, in terms of details of the answer to that, I could not, take so much time to answer that, but I could refer you to some available material on that. Our sister has kindly mentioned something about the set of tapes produced by the Islamic Information Foundation, and there is a whole album of 16 hours dealing exclusively with the issues of women and family in Islam, and there is actually 5 half-hour programs dealing specifically with polygamy from the sociological standpoint, from the comparative religion standpoint, from the standpoint of Sharia and why it was permitted and what are the limitations for it, and why is it a better solution for some individual and collective cases. But I hope you excuse me for not going into detail, because that could take at least 20 minutes to cover it in a superficial way. So I don't know how much I covered it now in 1 minute. But the reference, inshallah, will be available. There is also some small booklet published by MSA, or Islamic Book Service, called Polygamy in Islamic Law, which is much briefer than those tapes, but it might give some brothers or sisters who need some more concrete information for the discussions on that subject. I think there is a great deal of duality again in the mind of non-Muslims who raise this issue, either duality or lack of awareness. They don't look close and they just try to criticize others but not look closer to themselves. It's regarded as bad and immoral for a person to have a second wife for a legitimate reason, but it's regarded as totally all right to have a sweetheart who has absolutely no right and absolutely no protection, and there is no legitimacy in that relationship. Children want to sacrifice, to socialize with other Christian girls, but I don't know what kind of children, male or female, that is not so obvious in the question. But girls. But as parents, I tell my boys no. Why not comment on that? Again, there is some ambiguity in the question. If we assume that it talks about girls socializing with other girls or boys socializing with others, I think on one hand one cannot be or encourage the Muslim children to assimilate themselves in a non-Islamic environment, because as the Prophet ﷺ said that a person is very much affected and influenced by his friend. المرء على دين خليله, or المرء على دين جليسه. A person who has that close relationship indirectly, spontaneously will carry that influence. But on the other hand, as some people raise, rightly so, that if a Muslim cut himself totally from others and never talk to them or have any contact whatsoever, how is the person to offer da'wah to others. But in that case, if a person really with sincere intention wants to offer da'wah, and if a sister has another girlfriend or a brother has another boyfriend, just to offer da'wah and to discuss certain matters, especially if those individuals are more inclined to Islam, there is nothing wrong with this. But of course the idea of having boyfriend and girlfriend for da'wah, I don't think that is really justifiable. To sit together, two teenagers, to explain da'wah and to offer Islam to them. I know that it's not always Islam alone that is offered, so that's one has to be careful. If there's enough sisters to do the job, let them do it. If there's other functions where brothers would be involved, maybe an open but not private presentation of Islam. The hadith about hijab says, in effect, a woman must cover all but hands and face. What about the feet? The feet is an issue that some jurists differ. Some say it should be covered, some say no. So whichever way you feel, if you feel safer to have some kind of socks or something like that, fine. But there are both interpretations are available. Which is whether we have it. Okay. Is music okay? You want to get a full answer? Review the book, The Lawful and Unlawful by Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi. Very briefly, it says that if music is not of the sort of music that really stimulates the individual to do evil or lose his balance, and if it is not done excessively so as to keep the person from useful work or from prayers, if it's not accompanied by other evils like unnecessary mixing or immodesty, one opinion say that it would be permissible in that very limited sense. But there are other jurists who take a more strict view, but we do find evidence that in the day of the Prophet ﷺ, he did allow some kind of innocent music without mixing, without dancing, and all this sort of thing that take place today, especially in occasions like wedding and festivals. But if you want to get more particulars about the hadith and that, and the variety of explanations, that book would be an excellent source for that. The second one, maybe this is time to go back to some of those who had more than one question in the paper. When I tell my son not to wear a short pant, he said, why my old brothers do? What should I say? Well, to start with, the rule of Sharia is that the aura of the male that should be covered, according to the more common opinion, is between the navel and the knee, but there is also another opinion that says that part of the thigh of the male is not necessarily regarded as aura. But this does not necessarily mean that the male should always have the minimum, because it has to be put also within the spirit of Sharia. And the spirit of Sharia is avoiding fitna unnecessarily. So if the brothers and sisters are present together in a gathering, whether it is an Islamic school or a camp, an Islamic camp, it is not appropriate for the brothers to go, for example, bare-chested and say, all right, it is not aura. Yes, it may not be aura, but if there are other teenagers also in the camp, one should be decent enough in the way that he or she dresses. And I'd like to add also, it's not just a question of shorts in the presence of sisters, it is the question also of particularly tight pants. I'm not saying that it's haram for men, but extremely tight pants is just sometimes worse than other forms of this. Okay, 6 sisters were supposed to go to Newark Airport. If they are here, the van leaves at 5:15. So contact Brother Hassan outside, and please, okay. Does the message get through? The sisters are going to Newark, the 6 sisters. I hope they identify themselves. Okay. Can I get to one of those sheets that has more than questions? Because these were earlier ones. There is an old cliche, nothing looks bad on a man, but everything looks bad on a woman. Could you speak about a few of the Islamic as well as psychologic mentality as the child develops that can cause deviation from the Islamic path? I don't know if I understand that cliche or even agree with it. If some people feel this way, I think it might have reflected or been reflected in the earlier remark about a teenage daughter telling her father that my brother dates, but I don't. And of course, it's too bad for the girl, but it's okay for the boy. it might reflect this same thing, that nothing is wrong with the boy. Whatever he does is fine, but any mistake done by the girl, of course, that is very terrible. I don't think this has any foundation Islamically that I'm aware of. My daughter is ashamed from the way I dress the Islamic way. What can I do? Explain why. Explain that this is not just a sort of taboo, that you're doing that out of your own choice, out of your own commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Explain to her that if people are jesting or laughing or finding that this dress is weird, then we are in much better position today than the early Muslims who were even attacked physically and killed. In some cases even because of their practice of Islam. And it is a shame for a Muslim not to be ashamed of that dress. It is a shame to not make use of this atmosphere of freedom of practicing Islam and still have any question in mind about it. So one has to give the reason, the spiritual reason behind it, the obedience to Allah, the avoidance of the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the identity of us as Muslims. And I think if it's done in a kind and nice way, inshallah, like daughter, like mother, she probably would become around. My son, who is 7 years old, always fights with his colleagues when they talk about Islam. Is it better not to talk? Not necessarily. Maybe silence is better than constant fighting, because that doesn't help much. But I think one has to teach the child. One has to find out why is he fighting. Because quite frankly, maybe some parents might give the impression to the child that all those non-Muslims, since they are going to the hellfire, they're bad, they're evil, they're this, that, creating a hatred in the mind of the child towards non-Muslims. Whereas what I feel is the proper approach is not to teach the child to hate people, but to hate acts which are hated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I would not even mind telling my child that you should not hate Christians because they are Christians. They're misled. They don't have this information. It is our duty to offer da'wah to them. So he comes from the point of compassion toward others rather than just fighting with them. Sometimes the fight is because the child is bombarded with very offensive questions or something like that, because again this is the kind of literature people are exposed to. So one has to explain to the child again that these people are, they're ignorant of true Islam. You should not really get upset. They would not really listen to you if you fight. So try to explain to them, trying to teach the child. Sometimes the child is fighting because he doesn't have the knowledge or confidence to be able to reply. So he reacts emotionally. And again, you can deal with that, say, all right, what did they ask you? What did they say? And then just give him some kind of model as to how to cope with the questions courteously, but inshallah more effectively. One related question to what has been discussed on the question of singing, of music. What should we do to our children instead of listening to songs and TV? And what do you think about their addiction to watching TV programs? TV is one of the most useful and one of the most serious tools that most people have in their homes. By and large, of course, there are lots of damaging things that you all know that is on TV. But many times parents are hesitant to make sure precisely what to be watched and what not. Because they themselves indulge and watch these things, and they don't find enough guts to really tell their children don't watch this or that, because they themselves do it. So I think the first correction we have to start with adults. Our parents trying their best really to watch programs that are really educational and useful, and there is not much, or at least basically doesn't have anything that is objectionable. Or do they watch Carol Burnett show or all soap operas or all other kind of things? If the parents themselves are restraining themselves from that evil, I think the children will be more receptive to understand that Sesame Street might be okay. I'm not saying everything's perfect. It might not be perfect, but at least there's not much damage. There is learning process, watching films about nature or what Allah created in nature to be more accurate. Fine. So it does not come either by total prohibition, because the child could go to his friend and watch, nor by just leaving the door open and anybody has access to watch any program. And there are some families who, alhamdulillah, have succeeded to some extent of having really strict clarification as to what program are permissible and to what level, themselves applying that also. But the question of listening to songs and all that, Why do people want to listen to songs? Because they want to satisfy some kind of need, some kind of emotional feeling. And if we direct our children from the early age to taste the Quran, to enjoy reading and listening to the Quran, I'm sure in many cases, even though it might sound difficult at the beginning, they will get tremendous enjoyment of listening to the Quran, number one. Number two, if they have not reached that level yet, alhamdulillah, there are some Muslims in different parts of the world, including North America, who have already produced some kind of Islamic chants which are beautiful and nice. Some of them even have some form of music. So if you take the interpretation that good innocent music with good meaning and good Islamic chant is okay. The brothers, for example, in the Maya or Muslim Arab Youth Association, I know there are a number of very nice Islamically minded, full of good values, and it has nice music, nice rhyme, and the children love to hear that. So they hear, enjoy, and at the same time the ideas sink in their mind. In one visit to South Africa, I found some brothers there have produced also a number of chants which are very Islamically minded and very nice and very beautiful to listen to. So it's both recreational and educational. But we have to have patience, and we have to begin with the children since they're young. But to come the teenager after living all his life just like any American and then try to say, right, you stop that, it requires a lot more work and a lot more effort. My husband always repeats that the boys are better than girls, and more he learns, and also he forgives. If my son does something wrong, if my daughter does something wrong, he slaps her. Well, I think the answer, hopefully, is obvious. And maybe, inshallah, during the evening session, we'll talk a little bit also about the right of parents and children. And inshallah, we'll be mentioning some hadiths to show the attitude of the Prophet ﷺ about treating sons and daughters. So inshallah, that will be clarified further also. Dress for men and women. A lot of emphasis is put regarding women's dress, hijab. When men's garments are less spoken of, I believe that this code does not follow what Allah has commanded. Please elaborate. Well, first of all, to be honest with you, from the very beginning, there is no question that the requirement for a female dress is comparatively more than the requirements for the male dress. And as indicated earlier, it is not the male or female who made this laws, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and maybe for good reason also, some of which we may understand, because the male ideally and in many cases practically earns the living for the family. Some physical works may not enable him to do the job if he has so many loose garments, and sometimes some concession is given, possibly because of that, possibly because, again, that the comparative degree of attractiveness is more so in the case of a female not covered than the reverse, even though there is mutual attraction also. But I agree with whoever asked the question, is that some speakers and writers tend to talk about the code of dress only as it relates to female. And I think some of you who have seen the little booklet published by the Muslim Women Committee of the ISNA, or formerly MSA, it's called Muslim Women Dress, Quran and Sunnah. Even though it addresses mainly the hijab for women, there is a section there that deals with man's dress, and some requirements also are mentioned there. And those who wish to seek additional detailed information on that, again, if you allow me to make a quick reference, in the series on moral teaching of Islam, in the set of tapes, there is somewhat detailed discussion about the required, the commendable, the permissible, the despised or hated, and the haram aspect of dress. Some of this pertain to male and female both. Some pertain to male alone. Some pertain to female. So there's all kind of combination. For example, a male is forbidden from wearing silk or gold. A female is permitted. Both of them are required to cover awra. The awra definition differs. So there's all kinds of similarities and differences, but I agree that we should look at the subject in its own entirety, even though there may be differences in degrees. I think the notion that some people may have, that they have only to lecture women as to how to dress, and they themselves forget that men also should try their best to meet at least the minimum requirements, and preferably more than the minimum requirement, I think they should heed that. And I'm not really criticizing or condemning, because may Allah forgive me, I might have fallen and have fallen into that myself, at least in Islamic meetings. Alhamdulillah, there are some brothers who are trying now their best to come to those Islamic meetings in some Islamic dress for men. Maybe it's not the minimum required, it's more than the minimum. Even a loose pant would be fine, but if we try, inshallah, in our gatherings as Muslims to adopt this, alhamdulillah, this would generate a better Islamic atmosphere and, of course, reduce the protests from our sisters. For a working woman, does she have the right to spend money for the sake of Allah without her husband's knowing it, in case he does not like it to exceed a certain limit? Or in other words, if he does not feel... anyway, I get I had some difficulty with words, but I think I know the question. Well, first of all, from the Sharia standpoint, the private property of the woman which she acquired before or after marriage is exclusively hers, and nobody has the right to tell her what to spend out of it. She's free to spend as she likes, whether her stingy husband likes it or not. It is her property. Is this country class is introduced at the age, sex education is introduced at the age 10 or 11. Should Muslim children at the age of 10 or 11 be permitted to attend these classes? I would rather not, because I don't know how it's taught. And many times the way people look at the question of sex is quite different from the way a Muslim really should teach his child about that. I'm not saying that Islam says it's haram to teach the child basic things in a decent and appropriate way. But I know that some of you might have heard of some of the books purportedly teaching sex education, which describes everything in graphic details, leading, as we heard, actually there are some real cases where small children wanted to be very practical and really practice what they learn. So this is a very serious matter. I think I'd rather not have any person who does not have that Islamic spirit and understanding teach my child. They should be kept out of it, but you should be also given. We mentioned earlier that child is very curious, he'd like to know, but presented in an Islamic way. Getting to the Quran and Hadith, and if you have to give some explanation, give a viable and reasonable explanation suitable to his age, rather than simply telling him that the baby came in a bag by a store or something like that. Give a realistic but decent explanation. I wouldn't favor what's offered in the school. Is it alright for a person who after became a Muslim still keep secret about his or her identity as a Muslim? Well, it depends again on the situation. If you mean by identity practice of Islam, there is no excuse not to practice Islam. But we find, for example, in the Quran there is mention about a person who's forced to appear differently from his belief because of danger perhaps to his life. That's what it actually referred to. But his heart is really comfortable with Iman. So if the brother or sister feel that there is a particular accentuating and serious circumstance that they should not really declare it. Example, maybe a young brother or sister become Muslim and they know that their parents are too antagonistic to Islam, and if they know about it in the early days when he has not even fully comprehended and assimilated Islam, they might apply undue pressure on him. Maybe in a case like that, he might feel that it's advisable not to tell them until he really gets well established, and then perhaps he can take all kinds of pressure afterwards. If there are cases like that, perhaps there may be some justification for it. But if a person is just hiding or keeping secret because he's ashamed of being Muslim, then he should really ask himself, why did I really accept Islam? So there must be really good reason for that. Can one inherit from non-Muslim parents? The common opinion among jurists is that the difference in religion prohibits inheritance both ways. However, there are some jurists, one of whom is Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who said that a Muslim should not lose as a result of becoming a Muslim. And they said, why if a non-Muslim is clearly prohibited from inheriting from a Muslim, the reverse is not true, and that if a person becomes a Muslim, he will be entitled to inherit from a non-Muslim. This is not necessarily a majority opinion, but I think it makes sense in terms of Muslim not being at a loss as a result of following the path of Jews. But whichever interpretation, both are acceptable. Any preference? Something about Ramadan. How old must a child be to honor Ramadan completely? My daughter is new in Islam and is 12. Shall I teach her that she must fast all day? Well, in terms of the rule about fasting, it is compulsory when the person reaches adolescence, boy or girl, for that matter. However, if a person, for example, embraced Islam recently, and it's very difficult, and especially a year like this where the day would be very, very long, and if there is fear that if a person really pushes himself or herself too far, it might result in some kind of reversal or fitna to the individual, then one can perhaps make an analogy not to change the law. It is fard, still required, but to ask the person to try his or her best to the maximum ability until they really get used to doing fast fully and completely. But we have to be very careful here that you're not setting the clock back and saying, all right, for you, fasting is fard only for 15 days. You say it is required, but if you can't really do it for the first time, try your best, and inshallah gradually you will be able to do it. It's just like someone who comes to you and you say, like, I want to become a Muslim, but I drink a lot. And I know drinking is bad, but I cannot give up drinking immediately. Can I still be a Muslim? You can't tell him, all right, it's okay, even if you drink, it's fine with you. Nor could you tell him, no, you remain kafir until you stop drinking. Because just like putting the horse before the cart or whatever, the cart before the horse. Now, if you, for example, tell him that drinking is haram, and if you can't give it up immediately, it does not prohibit you from being a Muslim, but you should have a definite commitment and plan to give up drinking. You can perhaps make something similar kind of approach like this, if, again, it's not possible to fast, which is the idea. The final question, okay. Problems of education. I try to speak as fast as I can. I hope I didn't get you lost, but alhamdulillah, this way we were able to address some. But I do hope, inshallah, with those whose questions were not answered, inshallah, we do hope to keep them in the next session, the 7 o'clock session. Problems of education. Husband will not allow public school. Oh, even the husband doesn't want his children to go to public school, but he also doesn't like the Islamic school, and he's going in. Well, and the wife cannot teach at home. Well, if he's that critical and fussy, let him teach at home himself. I mean, I think that many people are expecting the impossible. I wouldn't blame a husband or mother for not really liking the public school. There is lots of damage done in the high school. But if you are blessed of having an Islamic school, which I hope, inshallah, will be the trend and the wave of the 80s in this country, inshallah, then you should not be overly fussy about what the school, teaches and some of the deficiencies that might be there, because definitely if you apply the rule of Sharia, the ahwan al-dararir, even if there is not much good in the Islamic school, it's definitely far better than the damage that takes place. But some parents, unfortunately, think also in some materialistic way. Not only husbands, wives also think the same way. That they think of the future of the child only as being just the best, regardless. In other words, if the child gets A+ and is really the most bright, but lost as a Muslim, to them that seems to be the most important thing, that he's the best in his class. I'm not saying that the advancement of our children is not necessary. In fact, alhamdulillah, many Muslim parents are proud, and not proud in a negative sense, but are thankful and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that children are the first in their classes or the best in the graduation and so on, which gives a good da'wah to others. But to say that I evaluate the choice between public school and Islamic school only because, this Islamic school does not have as many good teachers as the public school. Well, they don't have as many microscopes and labs as the public school is a very strange way of evaluating things. and it may reflect the loss or lack of understanding of priorities. So what if your child is A1 or A plus and is lost in public school? So if one sacrifices a little bit, you're right, he may not get as much facilities as there is in public school, but it's really that is the first consideration that you have to keep in mind. But I'm not trying to be overly critical, but there are cases where schools could be done at home. And if the husband and wife want to cooperate in that, he could do it. And I heard that legally, in many states, you could do that. You could get the curriculum and have the child being taught at home. So you could inquire from the school board. But if there is an Islamic school, I think it should be encouraged. جزاكم الله خير.